Hi everyone, Cam here from Yes Auto, and today I'm driving an M car. But not just any M car, it's an M5 competition. Now we all know the M5 as BMW's ultimate Q car. Lots of power, but with very subtle looks. The only thing is that they have another ultimate Q car that's based on the 5 Series, and it's the M550i. Lots of power and subtle looks. And it's around £30,000 cheaper than the M5. So what I want to know today is it really worth going for an M5, or should you just get the 550i instead? Today, we'll find out. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Now the M5 and the M550i may be subtle Q cars, but it's actually really easy to tell the difference between them because the M5 just looks so much more aggressive. So particularly around the front bumper, it's a much more angular design with lots of black trim, and these vents are all real. We actually have a radiator back here, so these are all designed to cool the car and channel air through it. We've also got a gloss black grille. You don't get that as standard on an M550i, and it bucks the trend of the buck teeth on the M3 and M4. Although I'm starting to kind of come round to the idea of the bigger grills, but if you're not a fan of it, get an M5 instead. We've got laser lights on this car as well, which look really striking because you've got these big blue highlights around the lights. They, however, are an optional extra, and they come in at about £1,000 as the visibility pack. Speaking of optional extras, carbon ceramic discs that we've got on here, £8,000. They offer some serious stopping power. However, it does take a little bit of getting used to. They can be a little bit bitey on the road. So if you're after performance driving, the ceramics are definitely the ones to go for, but if this is just going to be an everyday driver's car, I'd avoid them. And they sit on these M20-inch wheels. These come as standard. They look stunning. Moving further back, it's not a very muscular car, the M5. We've got some really cool performance highlights like we have on the front end. We've also got this black kind of fin at the side here with M5 competition written on it. It's not a muscular car though. M cars in the past have always had these big muscular wheel arches, but they don't really appear on the M5, so it's quite a subtle look. And it's probably because the M5 is gigantic and it's very wide, so they probably didn't have a lot of room to make it any wider. Still, we've got lots of M performance touches on here to set it apart from the 550i. And the back end, wow, I mean, this is seriously mean business back here. We've got 4 rocket launcher exhausts, and it's a sports exhaust system as standard as well, so it sounds a bit meatier. More black trim here, small little wing, and this super chunky diffuser, which just is so deep. I adore that, just gives it such a mean look. And you may have noticed that I keep calling it the competition, because there are 2 types of M5. There's the regular M5 and the competition, which is a little bit sharper and a bit more powerful. But the competition is the only one available in the UK. It's the same story for the M3 and the M4 and the M8 and the M8 Grand Coupe, all come in competition guise. It's not all about styling though. It sits lower to the ground. It's got stiffer suspension, reworked dampers, and of course, we have a big, meaty 4.4 litre twin turbocharged V8 engine producing 616 glorious brake horsepower and 750 Newton meters of torque. To put that into perspective, the M550i produces 523, which is still pretty damn powerful, but it's not as much as an M5. Now, some people might think of this as sacrilege, but the M5 is all-wheel drive. Power is sent to all 4 wheels through an 8-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. Doesn't sound very M5 at all. Well, the good news is that if you want, you can actually send 100% of the power to the rear wheels, essentially disengaging the front axle. so you can go for drifts. Not that many people will be doing that on their commute, but still. The only thing is though, is if you want to be ultra fast in a straight line, you'll want that all-wheel drive doing its business. And if you have the auto mode in its sportiest setting, this thing will go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.2 seconds. That is electric. So how much does all that power cost then? £102,000. Yes, the M5 competition is a very expensive car, and for comparison, an M550i is about £67,000, so you're looking at roughly a £35,000 difference. That being said, the M5 does feel like a very luxurious car. We've got carbon around here on the centre console, carbon on the dashboard, these gorgeous leather seats that are so comfortable. You've also got an M Performance steering wheel that is admittedly a tad on the chunky side, but still something to hold on to when you're going ridiculous speed. And you've also got a lot of technology in here. We've got this massive touchscreen infotainment system and a completely digital virtual cockpit. So the M5 is really well equipped, and you get things like Apple CarPlay thrown in for free, which is great. However, there is an extensive options list, and this car has £19,000 worth of options added on top of it. Now that's pretty much every option ticked on the list in something called the Ultimate Pack. Now that includes the laser lights, which are £1,000. If you want the more advanced driver settings, that's around £4,000, and the carbon ceramic brakes, which are £8,000. So it can quickly add up, but in all fairness, you don't actually need to add many of those options in because, like I said, the M5 is pretty well equipped. Now, one of the things I really love about this car is that if you're a geek like me and like to sit down and spend lots of time going through the settings to get your perfect setup, then the M5 is the car for you, because we can go into so many different modes to go and change it up. We've got settings for the chassis, the engine, the steering, for comfort, sport, or sport plus. But the really cool thing are the M buttons on the steering wheel. So I've got M1 and M2. And that's not necessarily two different modes. Theoretically, they could be identical. They're programmable. So the way I've got it set up is that M1 is like a slightly softer version of the full fat M mode. So it's more like every sport option is activated. M2, you can go full Sport Plus, and that's the one that if you really wanted to, you could chuck into rear-wheel drive. So you can tap it once to activate the mode and then tap it again to deactivate it. There is one option though that I'm really not a fan of, and it's the fragrance option. And I actually had to look at a Grand Tour video to figure out how to disable it, but basically there are two fragrances on board that will basically spray as you're driving along. And I thought one of my colleagues was just wearing a really strong cologne, but no, it's the car spraying fragrances at you. I turn that off as quickly as you can. You know, this is the first car I've been in where the back seats feel just as good as the fronts, because we have the optional screens in the back, and these are so cool. It's like being in an M5 plane. I can listen to or watch anything that I want. In fact, yeah, I can actually get TV in here, which is so cool. So I'm watching BBC News at the moment. I can't show you for copyright issues, but this is brilliant. Now, obviously you don't have to option those, but I really recommend that you do if you've got people coming in the back, because they are dead cool. And if you don't, why not hire a driver for the day and just sit around and pretend you're really important? In fact, if you own an M5, you probably are. BMW M5 competition on Britain's bumpy roads. Let's see what this is all about then. At over £100,000, the M5 is very, very expensive. But the good thing is, you get a lot of car for your money. We've already gone over how lovely the interior is, and on the road it feels like a very lovely place to be. Now, I've bought I've brought the M5 though to its toughest test straight away. I've not got any of the M modes on at all at the moment, and I'm on a very bumpy B road, and it is fidgety. It is a stiff car, this. Now, BMWs are usually a little bit stiffer than their rivals, so you're already getting a car that's quite firm. But because it's an M car, you are being thrown around a little bit, even without any of the suspension settings being in their stiffer setting. So while it feels a little bit firm on a B road, on a motorway, which is where I'm sure most M5s will be putting most of their miles on, this thing is very lovely indeed. Again, I'm on quite a coarse bit of motorway, and you can feel the odd lump and bump here, something that you would expect from an M car. I'm not going to knock it for that. But it does feel so smooth in every other regard. Now, you've got 616 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 of 3.2 seconds, so blimey. It's seriously torquey as well, so I'm in 6th gear doing 60 and I want to overtake someone, and there's 70. It just gets there so effortlessly. It's a really impressive engine, this. So it does a good job of being a very well equipped 5 Series that's a little bit firm on a B road. But what's it like to drive? Does this give me the fizz that something like an M3 or M4 does? In fact, you can watch my M3 and M4 review by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. Now, admittedly, I drove the M3 and M4 in the wet, which really isn't their ideal driving conditions, and they were a bit of a handful. Despite that though, I could feel that they were special cars among all the trying to just keep it in a straight line and not snaking every time I came out of a bend. This M5 though is so ridiculously fast that I'm finding it quite hard to enjoy as a driver's car within the speed limit. I can get a sense of it being a motorsport car low down and a lower speed, but I can't really enjoy it. I can go in a straight line very quickly, but to be fair, that gets old quite quickly. You want to be able to enjoy it in a set of bends. But is the M5 about drama? Is it not just meant to be the ultimate Q car? Everything is really understated. If you want all of that, if you want a really good Q car that isn't overstated and is powerful and is good to drive, would you not just go for an M550i, which has a V8 engine, it has a lot of power, and it's about £35,000 less than an M5? It's a hard one to say, because if you're thinking with your head, the M550 makes a lot more sense. And even if you've got the money for the M5, you could get an M550 and just spec it up to be the car that you want it to be. Then you have the ultimate Q car, because everybody just sees you in what looks like a pretty ordinary 5 Series. And that's where the M5 comes in. It's the car that you get if you want to stand out from the crowd, which kind of goes against what the M5 has set itself out to be over the past couple of decades. I think as a car that has to wear so many hats, the M5 does a superb job. I just don't think it's the master of many things. It's not the best driving car BMW M does. If you want that, you would probably go for something like an M3 or an M4, and if you're after something that's a little bit more understated, then the M550i is the one to go for. And I think what the M5 is good at doing is feeling like a luxury item. Not necessarily a driver's car, but something to indulge in. So should you buy an M5 or just get the M550i instead? Well, I think if you're thinking with your head, you get the M550i because it is such a good car for the money. If you're thinking with your heart, then of course you're going to get the M5, especially with those aggressive looks and ultra luxurious interior. If it were my money, because I love an M car, I'd probably just go on yesauto.com and have a look at deals on a used example, because M5s tend to depreciate faster than any other M product. In fact, you can get a used M5 for about £25,000 now for a relatively decent example that's, say, 7-8 years old. But I'd like to know down in the comments, what do you think is the better option, M5 or M550i? And that's from a buyer's perspective, because obviously, money no object, we would all want an M5, even though it's a little bit fun. I think that's how I'm going to finish things off. The M5 is really very impressive on paper, and as a car to drive, it is staggering. But I'm not in love with it.